Closing statements begin in hate crimes trial for Arbery killing. Prosecutors will argue that the men convicted of murdering Ahmaud Arbery pursued him because he was black. The defense says that they suspected him of break-ins in their neighborhood. Jurors will be asked to focus on the Arbery killer's motivation. Brunswick, Georgia. Lawyers for the government and for the 3 white men convicted of murdering Ahmaud Arbery are presenting closing arguments to jurors who must decide whether the men pursued Mr. Arbery through their South Georgia neighborhood because he was black or only because they believed he had committed crimes in their neighborhood. The defendants, Travis McMichael, 36, his father, Gregory McMichael, 66, and their neighbor William Bryan, 52, face hate crimes charges in federal court and, if convicted, could be sentenced to up to life in prison on top of the life sentences they received in state court for Mr. Arbery's murder. The federal trial, which has included nearly a week of testimony about the defendants' bigoted language and opinions, is notable for the way jurors have had to directly wrestle with questions of racism as a motive in a crime against a black man, an issue that was largely skirted in the state trial and the trials in other recent high-profile crimes against black people, including the murder of George Floyd by a Minneapolis police officer. The racist statements and opinions of the 3 defendants detailed in court were not directed at Mr. Arbery himself. But they were exceptionally harsh, a fact that even defense lawyers acknowledged, and were too frequent to be considered slips of the tongue. Mr. Arbery, 25, lived a couple of miles from the men's Satilla Shores neighborhood outside Brunswick, Georgia. On the day of his death, in February 2020, he jogged there and walked onto the site of a house under construction, as he had many times before. The McMichaels, who suspected him of break-ins in the neighborhood, began chasing Mr. Arbery, who was unarmed, in their truck. Mr. Bryan soon joined the chase in his own truck. The pursuit lasted 5 minutes, after which Travis McMichael shot Mr. Arbery 3 times with a shotgun. At the end of the day, the evidence in this case will prove that if Ahmaud Arbery had been white, he would have gone for a jog and been home in time for Sunday supper, Bobby Bernstein, a Justice Department lawyer, told jurors in her opening statement. Instead, she said, he went out for a jog, and he ended up running for his life. Instead, he ended up bleeding to death, alone and scared, in the middle of the street. The lawyers for the defendants acknowledged to the jurors that their clients had said racist things in the past. However, they said, that did not mean they had violated a federal hate crimes statute. A.J. Balbo, a lawyer for Gregory McMichael, called Mr. Arbery's death an American tragedy. But Mr. Balbo argued that his client did not racially profile Mr. Arbery, rather, he said, he had pursued Mr. Arbery specifically after Mr. Arbery had been seen by neighbors entering the house under construction. Mr. McMichael chased Mr. Arbery, Mr. Balbo said, not because he was a black man, but because he was the man. The 3 white men facing federal hate crime charges in the killing of Ahmaud Arbery were convicted in state court late last year of murder and were sentenced to life in prison. A Georgia judge sentenced both Travis McMichael, the man who fatally shot Mr. Arbery, and Mr. McMichael's father to life in prison without the possibility of parole. The 3rd man, William Bryan, received a lesser sentence of life with the possibility of parole. The men were found guilty of chasing Mr. Arbery, a 25-year-old black man, through their South Georgia neighborhood in a pair of trucks on a Sunday afternoon in February 2020. Mr. Arbery had entered a house under construction that day, and the men said they suspected him of property crimes in the area. The chase ended when Mr. Arbery, blocked in by the trucks, clashed physically with Travis McMichael, who shot him 3 times at close range with a shotgun. Mr. Bryan captured the slaying on his cell phone camera, and when the footage was widely distributed online, it stirred national outrage. In a January sentencing hearing, the lead state prosecutor, Linda Junakoski, asked the judge to deny the possibility of parole to the McMichaels, arguing that they had displayed a reckless history of vigilantism before the killing. She noted that the elder Mr. McMichael had referred to Mr. Arbery as an asshole as his body lay in the street and the authorities responded to the scene. There's been no remorse, and certainly no empathy, from either man, she said. She said that Mr. Bryan should be eligible for parole in part because he had cooperated with investigators.